Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show. The fat lad with you, Neil Pickup, in the mother fluffing house. And I'm really excited about this because I've got to, sometimes you get someone on the show that's a bit of an inspiration of yours, and this is definitely the case for me here. For those of you who don't know, the guy that's opposite me on the screen right now, let me give you a little bit of an introduction. This man is a multiple U.S. national champion, a multiple world arm wrestling champion. And they say that a man can be measured by the amount of respect that that man is afforded by their peers, by people who are in the sport or the pastime that they undertake. And if that's true, then very, very few people measure more fully than this guy. Because Leviathan Richard Lupkes is one of the most well-respected of all the arm wrestlers that I've ever met in my 30-plus year career. And his is way longer than that. Ladies and gents, Richard Lupkes is my guest today, and I'm excited to tell you that. Richard, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Now then, Richard, it looks like you're pretty relaxed and chilled out there, so I'm taking it. Are you in an area of the U.S. that's not being badly affected by the COVID-19 outbreak?
Yeah, we're out here, in the rural areas in southwest Minnesota, and in fact, our hometown is only, about 300 people, so this whole virus thing really hasn't changed our way of living too much.
And is everything there still open, the shops, the restaurants, things like that? Is there any effect on your sort of day-to-day life at all, or not much at all?
Well, the governor of Minnesota basically closed pretty much everything, except for what he deemed essential. Closed the restaurants. He left some of the hardware stores open. Basic things that you needed to survive. The grocery stores, of course, are open. But I think you're supposed to wear a mask, if you go in there. I've only been in one or two, and I've never worn a mask, and nobody's ever said anything. But, you see a lot of people with them on, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of mixed messages out there around how effective or how essential they are.
Yeah.
Richard, thanks for coming on the show anyway, mate. I really appreciate you giving up your time to join us on here. I know you're a busy man, a lot of things on. And I want to start just by giving people a little bit of insight on the you right now. If you don't mind telling us, Richard, how old are you right now, mate?
64.
64 years of age, and yet you're still in phenomenal physical condition. And a lot of people that have seen you competing recently, even against heavyweights who are in the prime right now, guys like Ryan Espy. I think you competed against Ryan middle of last year, is that right?
I did. I didn't put on a really very good show. I had just had carpal tunnel surgery in both of my wrists, and so I was only about, I'm trying to remember, 5 or 6 weeks out from surgery when I pulled Ryan, and so it was, not my best showing, but, Ryan's a very good arm wrestler, a strong guy, so you want to be at 100% when you pull that guy.
You certainly do, but I think it's indicative, even injuries and your surgeries aside, mate, you've got nothing to prove at all. Obviously, all the proving's been done a mile back. And it's a mile back or a few miles back. I want to start the show, really, mate. I'd like to understand the origins of Leviathan, the origins of Richard Lupkes, and where you sort of came into your sporting career, never mind arm wrestling. Where was that, mate? What was your sort of first sporting endeavour? Was it strength sport or was it another environment?
To be perfectly honest with you, I was never in any sports. When I was growing up through school, I was raised on a farm, and we were pretty diversified. So we had milk cows, we had chickens, we had laying hens, we had hogs, some cattle. So we had a little bit of everything, not a lot of, one thing. And I think we farmed maybe around 400 acres, but we just had one tractor to do it with. So,
wow.
Like when I was in high school, I was never in any sports because we had to go home and do chores and stuff. So, sports, I did play a lot of softball. I enjoyed, doing that, some slow pitch and fast pitch. I enjoyed that. But other than, that, I didn't do that much sports.
So you're sort of the archetypal country strong in some respects, mate. You came up as a farm boy, and when did you first become aware of your interest in strength or your prowess in strength, that prowess you clearly have?
Well, I was always, pretty strong. I got married young. I was only 18 when we got married, and I worked for an implement shop for a little while, and I weighed, like 175 pounds when we got married.
Wow.
And we would get semi-loads of oil in 55-gallon drums, and they'd unload them, and then I would roll them into this building, and I would actually roll them up my legs, and I would stack them on top of each other, So I was pretty strong back then, for only 175 pounds. I think the barrels, they probably weighed 400 or 500 pounds because they had 55 gallons of oil in them, so they were pretty heavy.
Yeah, and awkward as well, I imagine.
Exactly.
The fluid swilling around.
They had a lip on, on each end, so you could hang on to it with your fingertips, so that kind of helped, work your grip a little bit too when you were doing it.
I'm trying to picture you at 175 pound, Rich, and I'm really struggling to get my head around that concept because, obviously knowing you well like I do, you've got such a large frame, mate. Big joints, big hands, wrists, elbow. I mean, I think the first time I ever met you was, I think, Eskilstuna, Sweden. It was like, I was only a kid. It was like 1988, I think, around that time.
Yep.
And
I was over.
I remember I got a picture with you. You gripped up with me on the table after the show, and your hands were massive. I couldn't get my head around how big your hand was, how big and powerful your hand was. I mean, when you were 175 pounds, you must have looked disproportionately big in terms of your hands and wrists, your frame. Incredible. What were you just all stacked on the upper body, a bit like Rob Vigent Jr. now, or all upper body and smaller legs?
No, I was, proportionate, I think. My dad, he only weighed about 160 pounds, and his hands were almost twice the size as mine. I mean, it was, he had milk cows almost by hand, and everything we did on the farm was by hand. We didn't have a lot of machines and stuff back then, so, we scooped corn and we scooped manure. I mean, we scooped snow. Everything was by hand, so you always got plenty of exercise.
I can imagine you did, mate, without a doubt. So where did the interest in strength first come? What was your first introduction to strength sport, Richard?
Well, I'd actually entered a little tournament in my high school in 1974 for arm wrestling, and I actually won that. But, it was just a bunch of kids in school. And then in 1975, there was a little tournament probably about 30 miles north of us. It was on a Sunday afternoon. I seen a poster for it in a gas station.
Okay.
And that's about the only free time we had, living on the farm, because even on Sundays, we milked twice, once in the morning and once at night, but we got a little time off during the day. So we thought, oh, shucks, we'll, sneak up there and check it out. And back then it was just right-hand class, single elimination. And I think I was probably, in the 200-pound class or whatever they had. And I actually won my class, which, so I kind of got hooked on it a little bit there,
Who was running that back then, Rich? Can you remember who would?
Yeah, the gentleman's name was Al Justin. He was actually Minnesota state champion for many years, and he was from the St. Peter, Minnesota area.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big guy. He was a super heavyweight, back then. I don't remember how the classes were back then, Neil. I think if it was like 210 and over or 220 and over was a super heavyweight, there wasn't near as many classes.
So was there sort of like three broad groupings? Was it sort of like lightweight, middleweight, heavyweight? And that was the three.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. There wasn't that many classes back then. And like I say, it was only right hand and single elimination.
How many competitors would you get, Rich?
Oh, gosh.
That kind of show.
It was, it was actually a pretty decent turnout for a local little thing, because Slayton, Minnesota is about where it was at, and that town's only maybe 1,000 people, 1,500 people, and there was probably, all the classes together, I don't know, maybe 50 guys.
Okay, that's a decent little.
We thought it was a pretty good turnout, and that's actually where I won my first trophy, so I was pretty proud of that.
Absolutely, mate. So it never goes away, that. It's just like a special thing, isn't it, Sentimental value when you win your first event.
Yeah. I mean, the trophy was way better than a cash prize. I mean, that was something pretty special.
And you say, obviously, the bug bit at that point. Were you very aware of it? Did you sort of start to research arm wrestling there? And did anybody approach you about training or that kind of thing?
No. The guy, Al Justin, was putting on a few tournaments around the area, and I guess I kept in contact with him because, back then, either somebody mailed you a flyer or somebody would have to call you, because we didn't have any internet, or we didn't have all the communication that, we have now. So it was hard to find out where tournaments and stuff were.
When was your sort of next competition after that first one? Did you follow on the footsteps of that quite quickly, or did it take a while to come across another event?
They had Al Justin held the Sioux Falls, or the South Dakota State Championship, which was held in Sioux Falls, and I can't remember how much later that was. It was probably I want to say 3-4 months later, maybe.
Okay.
And it was downtown Holiday, and it was basically, the same way the Slayton tournament was, but it was for a state championship, single elimination, right hand only. And I was lucky enough to win that one, too. I would say, the turnout was probably a little bit larger, but not a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Quite interesting. And one of the questions I've got there, mate, when obviously you went along to these two events and won both, were there professional arm wrestlers of the time, of the day in those events, or did they have any segregation for sort of novice professional or amateur professional? Was there any splitting at all, or was it just all in?
Everybody was in the same class, and I think everybody was pretty new, that was there, because, we didn't know the difference between hooking or side pressure or anything else. We were just up there, trying to put the other guys.
Yeah, top end.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's funny because when I saw you compete in '88 and thereafter in a number of those early tournaments, your style was so. I mean, for someone whose demeanour is like your demeanour, so. I mean, you're the archetypal gentle giant, mate, and yet when you were up there at those times, you had some fury, son. I mean, you were intimidating. So powerful and so sideways. You just used to, a little bit reminiscent of Andrei Pushka in a way. Reminded me of that. Very explosive and just straight down, brutal side pressure. Did that develop as your career progressed, or did you have that from day dot?
I think I probably just learned it, from pulling. I mean, you used to be on the weekends, like on a Saturday night, we would go to a dance or someplace, and there'd be a live band with bar, and then pretty soon you'd be arm wrestling guys all night long, and you just sit at the table, and they'd be lining up coming to try and beat you, and used to arm wrestle all night long, just for fun, So I think it was, maybe that helped a little bit. Who knows? I don't know.
Now, when that first competition win happened and the second one happened straight off the bounce, there must have been a bit of buzz around you. I can imagine that the people that were attending these, particularly if they were, if you got the same crop of individuals who were going to the shows, they must have thought, who the hell is this guy? I mean, did anybody spot that did they pick up on the fact that you had a high degree of raw talent for the game?
I don't really think so, Neil, because everybody there was, I think it was probably one of their first times to ever arm wrestle in organized event. So, you know, nobody knew anybody back then. And so I don't think there was, you know, really nobody paid much attention to anybody. I mean, you just went up there and did your thing and had fun. And, you know, if you won, you won. You lost, you know.
What kind of background were the guys coming from, Rich? Were they from lifting backgrounds? Were they gym bunnies? Were they just farm boys like yourself? What kind of environment were you drawing most of the competitors from?
Well, there was one guy from Brandon there he was in super heavyweight class. I did not pull him, but he was definitely some kind of power lifter, maybe a bodybuilder, because he had a physique on him that, you know, really stood out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm trying to think. I think he won. It wasn't. I think he struggled, did win. You know.
Mm-hmm. Now, when did you get involved in lifting yourself, mate, and in pursuing the sport more actively? What was the sort of turning point for you? When did arm wrestling become a thing?
Well, after that tournament, then Al had a tournament down in Sioux City, Iowa, and he called that the Iowa State Tournament, which was, I don't know, maybe a year later, maybe only 6 months later. I can't remember. So we went down there for that one, drove down, and I actually got beat. I took second place, which I didn't like at all. So then, and I was married at the time already. So when we got home, I went to, I think we went to Walmart or Kmart. Well, Walmart wasn't even around yet, so it had to be like Kmart or some little store like that. And I bought a set of plastic weights. You know, back then the weights were plastic with cement filled inside.
Yeah.
And so I got a set of those, and then I would mess around with them after work, you know, in the evening when we got home, and probably train one body part once a day or something. You know, back then we didn't know how to lift, you know, so I mean, you just kind of try to learn a little bit, you know, on your own. There was no videos or anything else telling you how to do it, so.
And the guy that beat you in that competition, did he beat you because of his knowledge in the sport, or did he just meet you head on and you both went at it sort of raw barroom arm wrestling style?
Well, he was strong, but he had a shoulder roll, which I had never seen before. You know, he got his shoulder behind it and just pressed right down, and that was completely new to me. You know, I was always just straight up side pressure, you know, and this guy kind of knew a lot more about it than what I did. Mm-hmm. So I actually learned something from it, you know, and after that I thought, well, you know, if you can use your shoulder, that's going to improve my strength. And so I tried to, you know, started incorporating that myself a little bit, which helped, you know.
So at the time, were you very much arm wrestling in a very isolated manner, just literally pushing?
Exactly. Yeah.
And was this seated or standing, Richard?
These were all standing.
Oh, okay. Because I know that when I first started the sport, you used to alternate seated, then standing, and so on and so on. In fact, Sweden, I think, was seated, wasn't it?
It was seated.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like sit down.
I bet you did.
You know, I mean, to me, you know, arm wrestling is about strength, and to me, sit down is true strength. There's not as much body language, and you know, it just feels more comfortable to be sitting down and pulling. For me, anyway.
The matches used to last longer, didn't they? In general,
well,
a lot of the matches used to be, you know, it was because it was sort of hard to, like you say, there wasn't the body motion, and you had to really get through people. So at the Worlds, I remember my experience in sit-down arm wrestling, it was always sort of, the sticking points were much more rigid. They were hard to break through because you had to have tremendous flexibility. You had to watch the cane coming under your ass if your ass lifted up. So it was quite restrictive stylistically, wasn't it? There wasn't as much you could do. Like you say, it was raw horsepower.
It's more side power, more strength, you know, and I enjoyed it. I've, you know, knock on wood, I've never been beat sit down, you know, in my life. And, I've never had a long match in sit downs, you know, it's always gone good for me. So.
Yeah, that makes a great deal of sense though. My favorite ever Richard Lupkes story from personal experience, which you won't be aware of. We were at the, Arnold Classic I think it was the year that you had the tremendous battle with John Brzezinski and with Ron Bath. God only knows what year that was, but we were messing around down at the front of the stage the day after and walking round. And I met you and Shirley just walking around, and we were chatting for a few minutes. And I'll tell you who was on the stand. Do you remember the strongman, a guy called Jesse Marunde? You remember that guy? Had a flat top. Unfortunately, rest his soul, he passed away. But he was on the stand there, and they had the Thomas Inch dumbbell at the front of the stand, and gripping implements and things like that. And I remember you walked past and you were looking at this stuff, and we stood there, and you picked up the inch dumbbell and sort of like moved it around a little bit and then put it down and walked off down the... And I remember Jesse Marunde came over and went, "Who the hell is that guy?" He was so... I'll never forget the look on his face, literally like how you just nonchalantly mucked around with this thing and put it down and walked off. And he was like, "That's ridiculous. Everybody's been struggling to get that off the floor all day," and he just mucked around with it.
Yeah, I guess I didn't even realize what it was for. I just thought it was pretty cool looking.
Yeah, it was funny, mate. That was great. I absolutely loved it. You were blissfully unaware of the fact that you just impressed these guys so much. They were like spellbound by the fact that you were able to do that so nonchalant,
Wow, that's the first time I've heard this. I didn't even know it.
Oh, it was great. It was absolutely fantastic. Myself, Andy Barker, and a few of the UK lads were laughing so much at that. It was just it was a classic, really classic story, mate. Anyway, we digress. Let's get back to where we were. So, when you started to get that technique, where was your next step following your initial entry into the sport? Did you start to seek out arm wrestling competition?
Well, if they sent me a flyer, you try to get on a mailing list, and then if Al would have a tournament, why he would send you a flyer. But then there was a few other guys putting some tournaments on. I can't even remember where I ever went after Sioux City.
Were most of them local? Were you traveling to different states?
No, they were all within driving distance. For me, anyway, the first few years, we didn't go very far away. We had to be back home, to do chores and work. So, we didn't get too far away from home. But, boy, I can't even honestly tell you where we went after Sioux City. I mean, I think it was 77 or 78, they had the World Championships, and I don't remember who the guy was that put them on. They were down at Kansas City at the Worlds of Fun.
Okay. And
we went down there, and they were still single eliminations, right hand. The first year I went up against Al Turner, and Al Turner. Have you ever heard of Al Turner?
Yes, sir. Yes, I have. I never met Al Turner. Never met him. I've read extensively about Al. He was very famous for the wrist strength and so on. Used to always be in the Armbender magazine doing some crazy wrist curls and stuff. But I never met Al.
Yeah, me and Al were in the finals. We actually had our picture in Sports Illustrated that year. They were doing a feature on Al Turner. And, because he was Rocky Marciero's sparring partner, boxing sparring partner. Have you heard of Rocky Marciero?
I certainly have, yeah.
Yes, he was his main sparring partner. Al
wow.
Was.
I did not know that. That's incredible.
His face was all kind of beat up, and, he was a nice guy, but he just, he was...
So Al's background was fighting, was it? He was a boxer, or?
A boxer, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think I still have the magazine. It's probably, 77 or 78 Sports Illustrated. And then he would go up in his attic, him and this big guy, I can't remember his name, and they would bring a case of beer up there, and they would pull for a couple hours and drink beer. That's what his training was about. So, yeah.
So how did the match go with Al?
I actually slipped my elbow out of the cup. I felt like I was going to beat him, and my elbow popped out of the cup. Back then, they were round, and you sat your elbow down in the cup. And as soon as it did that, I stopped pulling, and Al took me and put me to the pin. And so I thought, well, it's over. So he beat me. I took second that year. And then the next year I came back, and I kind of was, I made it to the finals again, and then they announced what the prizes were going to be. For first place was going to be a motorcycle.
Ooh.
Second place was an arm wrestling table.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as they said that, I was taking second place. I didn't want the damn motorcycle. I wanted an arm wrestling table. So I didn't care if I won or lost. I took second again. I still have the table. It was one of the tables they used, down there in 78.
Absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
That's mega. And this is the donut rings where you're pinning straight across onto the higher pad.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, cool as hell.
Yeah, and it's perfect shape. It's like quilted, diamond stitched quilt, nice cups. I mean, it looks like brand new yet. It looks really nice shape.
Oh, mega. That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So
I love cups because, man, you could cheat like crazy in those cups.
Rising up and that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all you needed was a big forearm, and your forearm's against the edge of that cup. Well, that other guy isn't going to move that because, you're just basically leveraging against that side of the cup, so he could just pull all day and he just wear them out and then put them down.
So at this point in time, when you were going to these competitions, were you doing any specific preparation for arm wrestling at all, or were you literally just lifting some weights and showing up?
That was it. I just lift. I just enjoyed lifting weights, and I had built a table to pull weights on for arm wrestling, but I never used it. I actually used it at the Rushmore celebration. We used it for like a prize thing. Whoever could pull the most weights over got a prize or something. But otherwise, I never really used the thing. I just lifted. I enjoyed lifting and never practiced or anything. So,
were there any active arm wrestlers close to you, mate, that you would have been able to train with? No club, nothing?
No, there's nothing around here. No, and the sad thing is there still really isn't nobody around here. Probably the closest person to me that is serious about it would be up in the Twin Cities, like Josh Handelin or something like that. And that's 200 miles from here. So,
my God. So your entire career, Richard, you've been isolated and not had anybody working with you technically or any of those things?
No, never have.
That's incredible, mate. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, to never have effectively any table time and achieve what you have achieved in the sport is absolutely remarkable. I'm not sure that I know of anybody else that's done that, ever.
Yeah, I don't know. Back then, I guess I just figured it was more strength than anything, and I relied on strength. And, now, of course, it's a lot of technique and hand stuff. And, back then we didn't have straps or nothing. Nobody slipped grips back then, Neil. I mean, and if they did, I remember they would start them in a hook if you slipped,
I mean, Tony Celeste used to do the old power lock tournaments, didn't he, in Vegas and around the Nevada area. But at this time, was it more wrist wrestling? So were you started in the power lock, or was it straight up start?
We started straight up back then.
But top rolling wasn't really a thing.
No. And the interesting part was the second year at the Worlds at Kansas City, they had a 2-start goal. So they would actually say go, and the only thing you could move was your arm the first 5 seconds. Couldn't move your body. And then after 5 seconds, they would say go again, and then you could move your body. So
wow.
Really, yeah,
I did not know that either.
Yeah, that's what happened in 78 at the Worlds.
Unbelievable. Yep. I never knew that, mate. All this time I've been in the sport, nobody's ever shared that detail with me before. That's incredible. I suppose not many people would know it because how many were active? I mean, who were the guys then? Obviously Al Turner was one. Who was Mo Baker active there? Who was the?
I don't remember. I have no idea. Al Turner, won the class that year, and then I don't even remember the name of the guy that won me or beat me the next year. I don't even remember. And I was still in the light light heavies. I was not in the super.
So you were sort of the 200-ish.
Yeah, 220 maybe, you know, somewhere there. So I know I had to lose a few pounds to get under, but I always tried to stay under. And then, Bob Brown remembered that 2-start thing because I had mentioned it to him one time, and yeah, he knew all about it yet. So a lot of people don't know about that.
No, I didn't. I genuinely did not know about that. I knew about the old, obviously pulled on the ring pads and so on, very early in my career, and there was always, I remember the introduction of the staggered pad and the reasons behind that and so on and so on. But yeah, the staggered start with 2 goals, never come across that before.
I think it was 5 seconds. You know, I'm not 100% sure, but it was like 5 seconds or 7 seconds. I don't think it was much longer than that. But if you had enough side pressure, you know, you could just put them down, you know, just with that, as long as your body didn't move. But if your body moved any at all, why the ref would call you on it. So.
You had a lot of joint pain at that time, mate, doing that. I mean, obviously, you may not have done because you're so bloody powerful, and obviously most guys, as you say, you were beating quickly, but did you find that more people had arm issues at that time? Soreness, joint pain?
No, I mean, when I first started arm wrestling, my arm would kill me. I mean, on the way home, I'd have it, you know, sitting on an ice bag all the way home, you know, in the car or something, because my elbow and stuff would be so sore, but then it kind of, I don't know if it just got used to it after time, you know.
Yeah, seasoned.
Yeah, exactly. It just kind of went away a little bit, but.
It's good to know that Achy Breaky has no respect at all for timelines. For anybody out there, if you're just starting your career in arm wrestling and you're experiencing the vile feeling that is achy breaky arm, you know that even Richard Lupkes had to deal with that.
Oh, yeah.
In the 70s, mate. Oh.
Yeah. You got to pay your dues, I think.
I bet you dished out a bit of achy breaky to people as well. I can't imagine running in front of that side pressure. That would have been a horrible experience.
I know I went down in Iowa, they had a wrist wrestling tournament, and then if you would win your class, why then they would send you to Petaluma for the Worlds. Mm-hmm. But the stinker was you were supposed to be from Iowa, and we lived 3 miles north of Iowa in Minnesota, but we went down anyway and told them we lived in some little town in Iowa. They never checked your license or nothing. So I actually won my class, and then I jumped up in the supers, and I won the super heavyweight class too, but I actually separated my left shoulder doing it.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
so we went home. That was about a 90 miles ride back home, and we did chores and whatnot, and then I went to the emergency room, and he popped my shoulder back in, you know, and so.
And you were pulling right-handed and you separated your left shoulder?
Yeah, because see, wrist pressing on underneath. You know, this way, and I don't know what the deal was. I must have. I don't know how I did that. It's pretty.
I know a couple of guys who have similar injuries. Particularly guys who are either shoulder press or hook hard, deep hook. I've had a couple of guys that have blown their either pec, shoulder, on the opposing arm from where they're pulling. Yeah, not unusual. I've seen that a few times, funnily enough. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You wouldn't think it would happen on your left arm, but that's why, and for me, I just feel too confined in here with wrist wrestling. I loved it when they had the peg out here because you felt like you had more freedom, you know.
Yeah. And at this point, you're still sort of 220 pounds.
Yep.
So you were growing, but not. And had your sort of interest in strength and fitness generally, in weight training and so on, developed a great deal at that time, Richard? Yeah,
I think so. And, you know, I won that, and then we actually drove out to Petaluma in the car for the World Wrist Wrestling, and that, at that time, was still single elimination, right-handed. And I don't remember, that had to happen in the late 70s. So I don't remember who was all out there. I won my first match against a guy that had been runner-up the year before. It was a long, hard match, too. I mean, it was tough. And then I got beat the second match. And of course, then you're done, single elimination. And so
Mm-hmm.
It was a long ride home, I tell you.
Unbelievable. And do you recall the names of any of these guys that you pulled in back then?
No.
So none of them none of them are still around in the game. None of them you've seen since, or
probably not. I mean, these guys were older than I was, and I was probably around 20, 21 or so back then, and these guys were in their 30s and 40s.
Yeah, so effectively you were just a kid, really, at the time.
Yeah. These guys were all pretty well seasoned pullers too. I mean, these guys knew what they were doing on that table, and that that was wrist wrestling. So you're inside here, and that's a totally different game than arm wrestling.
And were most of those guys based in the California area, or was there an established circuit in California, or were there other established circuits outside of California that you were aware of and became aware of?
Well, I don't know. That was Petaluma. That was the thing that was put on what was it, the Wide World of Sports back then?
Sure, yeah. And it was massively rated as well.
It was. That was probably the biggest arm wrestling event, around at that time. So I didn't know anybody out there. I mean, it was just me and the wife. We went out there, drove out there, and in fact, I think it was probably 78, because my dad had just gotten a new car in 77, and I begged him to use that, so I borrowed his new car to drive out there. It didn't have enough money to have a hotel, so we slept in the car, and I figured, first place was a couple $100. Well, I'll win that, and then we can have a hotel, and, we'll live big on the way home, but it didn't happen, so.
It's funny, after all these years, mate, you see yourself and Shirley at events, and you're still sort of very much private. You keep yourself to yourself at all these shows. I actually feel sorry for you that you've never had, with you telling me today that you've never had people there to train with on the table. It's shocking, actually. I mean, it's frustrating. It's kind of sad, and it's shocking that people didn't even reach out to you in that respect and say, because the potential, I mean, let's be honest, you achieved so much in the sport anyway, but the point I'm making there is, can you imagine if you'd have had a lot of table time, where you could have been, where you could have got to? I mean, it's fair to say a lot of your potential is probably untapped, mate. You would have come, the table time and the benefit that gives you, just in terms of familiarity of positions, it would have spurred you on enormously. I can only imagine where the hell you'd have got to.
Yeah, I don't know. I was in the 88, 89. I feel I was in my prime, and I was by far when I was the strongest. I was in my 30s, and I could move a lot of weight in the gym, and I felt really good on the table. I really didn't have too much trouble. Well, I lost a couple times here and there. I lost to John once at the Over the Top tournament, first time I ever pulled him, and then.
So that was your first ever meeting of Brezink?
Yeah, that was at Over the Top. Yeah.
We've skipped. I want to focus big on Over the Top, definitely, because obviously your insight on that is going to be fabulous. But in terms of the sort of the late 70s through the 80s, at what point did you become that dominant established force that I saw in Sweden? Because for anybody who's new to Richard, who hasn't done their homework on Richard, please take the time to do a bit of backstory on Richard Lupkes. Look him up, see what you can find, and if you can find any gems of this guy's matches. We're talking about a level of dominance that very few people have commanded in the super heavyweight division. I mean, it's fair to say, without sort of blowing your own trumpet too much there, Richard, you used to run through people like a joke. I mean, at the World Championships, I'm not sure I've ever seen anybody, with the possible exception of Sharon Remez and once Gary Goodridge, go through the class with that same level of dominance. I mean, you just absolutely decimated everybody that you faced. Your longest match time must have been 1/10 of a second. Nobody even slowed you down. It was ridiculous. And every time I saw you at that period of time, literally every time I saw you compete, it was the same suit warmed over. You just crushed people. So At what point in time did you get to that stage where you were just running people over?
I don't know. I think I kind of, I went to a few tournaments, all small ones, especially after we went out to Petaluma. It kind of took the wind out of my sails, and then it always seemed to me like the super heavyweights were always getting all the attention and stuff. So I just told my wife, I'm just going to start eating, and I says I'm going to put on weight, and I want to get stronger, and become a super heavyweight. And so I really didn't I don't think I did a whole lot of arm wrestling. I mean, nothing crazy from probably 79 to, probably mid 80s, maybe not even, there was probably some state tournaments and little stuff that I went to, which, was no big deal. But then, from, the Worlds in Kansas City, probably all the way up to 86 when they had the over the top tournament I just stayed in the gym and, worked out and tried to get stronger. I know a friend of mine came over with a trucker magazine and said there was a big ad in there about the over the top tournament, and they were having qualifiers all over the United States. And if you wanted to qualify, you had to go to one of those, and then it was going to be in Vegas, and he was all excited about it. So then that's the only reason we knew to go to it, I went to the qualifier in Chicago, and I won my qualifier over there. So.
And at that qualifier, Rich, were you just running folk over there? Did you just kill everybody again?
Pretty much. I met Danny Stone. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I met him in the finals, and I actually let him hit me, and he took my wrist, went back with it, and I looked at him. I just went, boom, and just pounded him.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was just completely amazed. He said nobody's ever had done that to him, and to me, I guess I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I didn't know anybody. Dave Patton was there. He won his class, of course. Dave was a tremendous arm wrestler back then.
Yeah, he really was. Did you pull Dave at all? Did you ever get on the table?
No, I never did.
Because now, obviously, latterly, we never, and even back in '88, I don't think I never saw you on the sort of training table or practice table with people. You were sort of just there, crush everybody, gone.
Yeah, we went, then after that, we went to the Nationals and the Worlds. One of the things I got to tell you before I forget about it, we were at, I think it was the sit-down Nationals, and I think they were in Atlantic City. Back then you had to take I think you had to take either first or second, either at the sit-downs or the stand-ups, and then you could qualify to go to the Worlds. And we went to the sit-downs. I won the stand-ups also that year, and then we went to the sit-downs, and we were off stage, and they had a stand-up table set up, and it was funny. This young guy comes up and, hey, I like to pull you and see what it feels like. And I said, sure, and we lined up, and I just kind of played with him, and I tried to tell him a few things. Of course, I was, I'm not that educated in arm wrestling, but I just told him what I did. Well, lo and behold, here the guy was Ron Bath. And now look at Ron today,
Ron Bath.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Mega.
Ron remembers that too, I'm sure,
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's as cool as what a great story. And how heavy would Ron have been then? Like 90 kilos? Because he was a little lighter when he started. He was lean and very athletic, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was pretty thin. I'd say he was, 180, 200 pounds. He was lean and mean, and I was, oh shucks, I was probably 280, 290, so I mean, he really didn't stand a chance. But now look at him.
Wow. Great story again, mate. Absolutely great story. So, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this first part of the Leviathan story. Richard Lupkes, part number 1. And we will be back with Richard very, very soon for part number 2, guys. So keep your eyes peeled. For those of you new to the channel, if you do like what we do here, please like, share, subscribe, tell everybody about it. And till that time, ladies and gentlemen, take it easy, peeps.